Hello. All right. Hi. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you so much for joining us for the New Year's Colloquium. And, we're very happy to have Professor Mel Rutherford and McMaster to give us a talk. So it happens to me that he's also our chair for over the past 5 years. Oh my God. Anyway, so I'll do a short introduction if he agrees. So I'm not sure, it doesn't matter. So Mel has a very impressive academic journey. So he was trained at Yale in the 90s, I guess, then completed his PhD at UC Santa Barbara, and then moved to University of Cambridge as a Fulbright Fellow. Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's very impressive, but it says that there's a footnote. Very impressive. Well, Professor Rutherford also built an extremely strong academic record. So he has been named as a Canada Research Chair, Tier 2 for twice over the course of 10 years. That's a little too long. And then, of course, his research has been consistently, overly, being funded by NSERC, CHR, by his extraordinary research and cutting-edge discoveries in social perception and development, and more relevant to a lot of clinical studies. Has a big focus on autistic traits and its early development as young as infancy. That was founded by CHR. Well, he definitely, we know, is our big leader. That's why we have him here. But his leadership also shown greatly in his among his mentees. And over the past decades, I would say, he has trained many extraordinary, excellent graduate students, postdocs as well. And since I'm the grad chair, unfortunately, I really found a handful of graduate students not very successful. So I'm going to figure it out. Only a few is a very disturbing fact. Well, before we actually kick off today's talk, I have to say, in the interest of time, that, since Mel is currently our chair, and this is the last year of his term, and I should make it clear that today's talk has nothing to do with any re-election campaign at all. So make sure, don't take it differently. There will be no slogan, there will be no promises, there will be no voting at the end of today's talk, only questions on scientific matters, evidence and discussion, anything scientific. All right, so I think Mel is about to kill me. So, but let's join me welcoming Mel Rutherford for his talk about adaptive perception and the visual system is designed to process fitness relevant information. Good luck, Mel.
Thank you, Gabriel, for that introduction. So, as my title suggests, I want to convince you that the human visual system is designed in particular to process information that's relevant to our fitness. Fitness relevant information. A lot of my talk today has to do with visual attention, and I want to convince you that we attend to things that are relevant to our fitness as humans. Just a little outline. I'm going to start briefly talking about the function of vision, the function of perception in general, but the function of vision in particular. And then I'm going to sort of go through some research out of my lab. We've done some research pertinent to the attention, people paying attention to faces, people paying attention to social information. We're going to talk about animacy perception. I'm going to talk about a couple of studies looking at childhood and infants attending to social information, and then I'm going to end with a couple of studies that looks at social perception on the autism spectrum. So that's where we're going today. And I want to orient us to the function of vision as we start. A couple of things that are not the function of vision. Intuitively, it might seem like the function of vision, the function of perception, is to see the world, right? Till you open your eyes and there's the world, and now you know what's in the world and you know everything about the world because you've looked at it. I'm going to argue that's not what's happening. We are sensitive to the information that we need to be sensitive to operate in our domain, in our species. Perception is species specific because different species have different adaptive problems. Evolution by natural selection is not going to tolerate organs that cost more than benefit. An organ, including the visual system, has to benefit more than it costs. And so it's not just, we don't need to know everything. We need to know specific things. And the function of our visual system is to hone in on specific things that are fitness relevant. Another thing that our visual system is not for, the function of vision, is not just to see pleasant things or beautiful things or enjoyable things. Obviously, we experience we see things that are ugly, and we feel things that are painful, and we experience things that are not pleasant. Again, we don't just need to see what's true, we don't just need to see what's beautiful. The function of vision is to inform our decisions with respect to our survival and our reproductive interests. We open our eyes and our attention is drawn to information that can inform decisions that we make that are relevant to our survival and our reproduction. And that's it. That's the function of vision, that's the function of perception. James Gibson makes this point that we can't see the entire electromagnetic spectrum. We see the one small part of it that we call light. But it's not that the part that we call light is physically different from the rest of the spectrum. We call it light because that's the part we can see. And that's the part we can see because that's the part of the spectrum that passes through the Earth's atmosphere and interacts with the objects that are important to us. The objects that we interact with in a way that increases our fitness and reproduction. So we call it light, but it's really just part of a continuum. And that's an illustration of what our visual system is for. And by the way, other species will have different parts of the spectrum that are available to them. And the part that we call light is or is not important to different species. Okay, so that's just a little overview of the function of vision. And most of this talk today is even more specifically about social information and the fact that our visual system is designed to perceive social information, to attend to social information, to remember social information, because social information is among the most important information in our environment. The first experiment I'm going to talk about is what we call the face in the crowd effect. The phenomenon that we've discovered in this, that we've illustrated in this experiment, is that we attend to angry faces much more quickly than we attend to happy faces. And we're using this paradigm where we've got a number of different faces. We've got maybe one happy face or one angry face and a number of distractors, and we just want to see the reaction time that people, how long does it take to find the happy face or the angry face. The idea is that if a face is angry, that's a threat in our environment. We're going to attend to it more quickly than other faces. One thing we did in this experiment that was unique was we created the distractors to be psychologically intermediate. So they're not just physically intermediate. We created a continuum from happy faces to sad faces. We didn't just go for the physically intermediate face. The distractor was the psychologically intermediate face. So we had people rate, is this happy, is this sad? The most ambiguous face, the psychologically intermediate face, was the distractor for this task, and then they saw the distractors and the target, and they had to tell us if the target was there. And as we predicted, people were faster, the reaction time was faster if the face was angry, and also accuracy was higher if the face was angry. So amongst these psychologically intermediate distractors, people are faster and more accurate at finding an angry face than finding a happy face. So, and this happened in a very short time frame. So the human visual system is good at seeing these threats. These threats pop out when we look for them. I also want to suggest not only do we orient to faces quickly, but we also are really fluent at processing faces. When we see faces, we see them, we perceive them, we process them, we understand them really quickly. Here's a demo. Who was that? That was Katy Perry, yeah, the First Lady of Canada. We don't need much time to process a face. With it in milliseconds, we recognize who that is. We know some of their characteristics. We know that perhaps their emotion. That face processing happens really fast. When you walk into a room, of course, there's a number of objects. There's art that might be interesting to look at. There's furniture. There's food that might attract your attention. But the thing that you look at first when you walk into a room is going to be faces. We orient to faces really quickly. In this experiment, it's another visual search task. And we're testing the hypothesis, again, that we're going to find a face fast in an array. The task is that we start with a fixation cross, then we get a category label, and then you're supposed to say whether or not the object in the green frame is or is not consistent with the category label. And then we've got a distractor, a red frame that might pull your attention. But here's the thing, we obviously we're predicting that you're going to see the face fastest, but we're doing this in front of an eye tracker, and we're interested not just in how fast you can find the face, but how long you look at the face, given that we're sitting in front of an eye tracker. So here, one of our predictions, of course, was that the amount of time it takes to find the face is faster than the other categories. We had a dog, some furniture, a car, a plant, a bird. And people are significantly faster at saying yes or no, the face was the category we were looking for. And some of the other categories sort of collapsed and weren't statistically different. But the face was fastest. Not surprising. But here's the part that was surprising. The proportion of first fixations, regardless of what category you're looking for, was more likely to be faces, especially in the upright condition. Not so much in the inverted condition, but if the faces were upright, that's what people looked at first, regardless of what their task was, whether their task was to look for a face or not. Here's what's even more surprising. The fixation duration is significantly less for the face. And this is the part where I'm making the claim that our perceiving and processing of faces is fast. It's hyper rapid. People looked at the face first, they found the face first, they looked at the face first, but they didn't linger on it. They didn't need to continue looking at the face. The fixation of the face was shorter than other images. And this is kind of interesting because a lot of times in the field of visual attention, we make an inference, we make an assumption that looking time is a good index of interest. And I'm suggesting here that there's a dissociation between looking time and interest. We're interested in faces, but our subjects didn't look at faces for very long. They looked at it, they got the job done, the face was processed, they moved on. Okay, we also did some work, following up on this, looking at faces and attention to faces, we also looked at attention to hands. Humans are unique in how useful our hands are. We do a lot of socializing and social signaling and communicating with our hands. Sometimes we use hands for language. Sometimes we use hands as gestures that accompany language. But also a lot of the things that we do involve our hands. A lot of things that we do that use tools involve our hands. Writing involves hands. So a lot of the agency that people use to enact anything in the world is going to involve hands. So we wanted to know if hands also attract visual attention. And again, we're using a visual attention paradigm, but this time we're using a dot probe task. So I want to just take a second to explain the logic of a dot probe task. In a dot probe task, after you look at a central fixation cross, you're presented with two different images. The images are presented really briefly, half a second, and then right after the images disappear, there's a dot either on the left or the right. So either where this image was or where this image was, the participant's task is to locate the dot. And the assumption is that if the image that appeared on the left attracted your attention, then you're going to be faster at finding the dot when it appears on the left compared to when it appears on the right. That's the dot probe task. It's used to probe visual attention. And that's what we did to test whether hands attract attention. We had 4 different categories: hands, 5-armed starfish. We thought that was a good kind of foil for a hand. Tools and wheels. And the hands were, people were significantly faster at finding the dot if that location had previously been occupied by the image of a hand. So we found evidence that our visual attention is drawn to hands as well as faces. Some of the work that I do has to do with autism and observers who are on the autism spectrum. We know that there are several kinds of perceptual differences among people on the autism spectrum, one of which is social perception, social information. There's a lot of evidence that people on the spectrum process visual information differently than typical people. In this particular, paradigm, we're looking at social orienting. Social orienting, our attention can be captured in a lot of different ways socially, one of which would be eye gaze. If I look at something over here, a lot of people their attention's gonna shift over here. Pointing is one way I can orient your attention socially. And another way that social orienting works is taking a posture where it looks like somebody's gonna throw a ball, especially if they're gonna throw a ball at another person. Those are types of social orienting. Your attention can also be oriented by non-social things like arrows, but compared to orienting to arrows, social orienting is more automatic, it's faster, and it also engages dedicated brain regions. So we were looking at this kind of social orienting, and we compared it to non-social orienting. So this thrower is cueing your attention to this direction in a social dyadic context. Here there's no social dyadic context. They're going to throw a ball at a tree. So it's the same central figure orienting your attention, but here it's a non-social context. And so we wanted to know if that social context had an impact that was different on people with and without autism. And this is a test of whether that orienting, it was automatic, because on some trials, it's a valid trial. Sorry, I need to mention, the observer's task was to find where this X was. The X is either in front of the thrower or behind the thrower. If it's in front of the thrower, it's a valid task because their posture signals the direction where you're going to find the target. Here it's an invalid trial because the target is behind, and so it's counter to what would be indicated by the person's posture. Here's the social context, and here's the non-social context. And that if our observers respond to that cue when it's invalid, that's a test of the automaticity. That means they got tricked because this guy's posture was automatically cued them to this direction, and it cost them in terms of reaction time because the target was behind him. So we wanted to know if this social orienting was automatic, and we wanted to know if there were group differences among people with and without autism. One of the things we found here was that the automaticity was different in the different groups. So for the blocks where the central figure was predictive, the central figure was consistent with where the target was, that helps the neurotypical people. NT is neurotypical, that's our control group. They're faster at the social trials than the non-social trials during these blocks where the cueing is valid. And the people with autism, it actually cost them. They were slower on the social trials than the non-social trials when the cues were valid. Moreover, this relationship that we were looking for between the valid and invalid trials, we only saw in the typical group. So this dotted line, these are the typical observers. The solid lines up here are the people with autism. And we see this pull apart here where the valid trials are the difference between the valid and the invalid trials in the social condition when the social cue is counter to the target position. We see that in the neurotypical group, and we don't see that in the group with autism. So again, evidence that this cueing is automatic, it's irresistible amongst the neurotypical group, and that wasn't true for the autism group. So we see evidence we see evidence of social orienting among people who are neurotypical, and we see group differences among people who have autism. We've also done some work in my lab having to do with the perception of animate motion and the perception of animacy generally. Again, the visual system is drawn to things that are animate. We want to look at things that are animate compared to things that are inanimate. They're more interesting. They draw our attention. We get there faster. We process them more quickly. Sometimes in some experiments, this animacy is cued morphologically, like with things that have eyes. A figure that has eyes is going to draw our attention compared to objects that don't have eyes. But in this particular experiment, I'm talking about an animacy cue that's based on motion. So if you imagine that you're sitting here and in the periphery, a mouse runs by you, your attention's going to be drawn to that mouse. As soon as you get that motion cue, you're going to attend to it. You're going to look at it. You're going to start processing it. You're going to know that it's animate even before you've foveated it, even before you've looked at it. So that animacy, that motion cue to animacy is really strong, and our visual system is designed to attend to that. I do have a little demo of even really simple geometric figures can be perceived as animate. This is a demo from 1944. Heider and Simmel created this demonstration. You can see even though these characters are a couple of triangles and a circle, this is a rich story that you're perceiving. You can see personalities, you can see characters, you can see emotions, you can see some drama unfolding. You can see fear, you can see anger. And then in the end, you see some toxic masculinity. There you go. So Heider and Simmel created this demonstration, and when they just bring adults into the lab and just say, describe what you see, people aren't going to say, well, there's a triangle, there's a circle, and they move around. They actually tell you about these characters and what they're doing and what their goals are and what their emotions are. So even based on really simple geometric figures, we can see animacy, and our visual system is prepared to process that animacy. So we wanted to test the hypothesis that that speed is a cue to animacy. Prior to this work, we had seen demonstrations, we had seen experimental evidence that acceleration is a cue to animacy, but we thought, what about if there's no acceleration and it's just speed differences? Will people see something as animate or inanimate? We built this contraption so that the participant can look down onto the horizontal monitor and not have to account for gravity, the gravity is not going to interfere with what they're seeing. They're just seeing things moving horizontally. They're going to see dots, and dots are going to move across the two circles that are the same size. One is going to move across that circle faster than the other. This is just, whoops. Oh, my movie isn't a movie. Well, my movie was supposed to be a movie, but it's as exciting as it sounds. There's a dot that moves across the circle. And it's a two alternative force choice. One of them moves faster than the other. And sure enough, oh look, it moved. That's what they saw. Oops. And what we saw was when the dot moved faster, 76% of the time participants saw it as more alive. They'll say it's alive compared to the one that moves slower. So, and that's again without any acceleration. Just speed alone, if something is faster, it's going to look like it's alive. Then we wanted to do the same thing, but there aren't any speed differences. There are illusory speed differences. We created an illusion of speed differences, and we used the Ebbinghaus illusion. Those of you who are familiar with the Ebbinghaus illusion will know that these circles, these central circles, are the same size, but it looks like this one's bigger because it's being contrasted with small circles. It looks like this one's smaller in contrast to the bigger circles. So that size difference is an illusion. But what we reasoned that if two dots, again, two alternative force choice paradigm, two dots move across these central circles at exactly the same speed, because this one looks like it's going across a smaller circle, it's going to be perceived as smaller, less likely to be perceived as animate. This one's traversing the circle that appears bigger, and so therefore it's going to look like it's going faster, and it's more likely to be perceived as animate. No difference in the speed of these two dots, but they're seen as alive. And this is between subjects. Some subjects we asked which one went faster, and those subjects thought that the one that crossed the apparently larger circle was going faster. And a different group of subjects, we asked them if it looked alive. And again, the dots that cross the apparently larger area more likely to be seen as alive. So no speed difference, but we created an illusory speed difference, and it essentially saw the same results as in experiment 1, where there actually was a speed difference. So the visual system's ready to respond to speed, to use speed as a cue to animacy, even when it's an illusory speed difference. The illusory perception of speed also cues animacy. I'm going to talk about a couple of experiments in the developmental domain, because all of these things that I'm talking about develop early in the visual system, and we've done a couple of experiments to look at that early development. The first experiment we did was with 4-year-olds, and we were able to show that 4-year-olds show a kind of a pop-out effect for chasing stimuli, for dots that are moving around as if they're chasing each other. Let me just quickly give you the logic behind the pop-out effect. I know almost everyone in this room knows this, so I'll be quick. But the idea between a pop-out, the idea behind a pop-out experiment is that the subject has to search this array to find a target, and here the target is the red object, and the red object's going to pop out. And we know that it popped out because it doesn't matter how many distractors there are. The number of distractors isn't going to impact reaction time. They don't have to look at every single one of these distractors to find the red object. But in contrast, if there's no pop out, there's still a target, there's still a number of distractors. Here there's going to be a relationship between the number of distractors and the reaction time, because they do have to engage in a serial search. So that's that logic behind the pop-out effect. We used this logic to look at 4-year-olds and ask 4-year-olds if they could find a dot that's chasing another dot in a scene. Following the logic of the pop-out effect, there were a number of different distractors. They might have seen 2 distractors or 4 distractors or any number of distractors. The task was always to tell us which dot is chasing another dot. In order to keep these 4-year-olds interested and engaged, we kind of dressed it up, and we told them it was a meadow, and though there was a wolf in the meadow and there was any number of sheep in the meadow, can you find the wolf in the meadow? And among some number of sheep that were the distractors, they had to find the wolf, and this was a touch screen, so they could just touch it when they found it. And what we found was there was not a significant effect of just the number of distractors. So no matter how many distractors were moving around on the screen, they could find that wolf, and they could find it in approximately the same amount of time. So we took that as evidence that there was kind of a pop-out effect. They could find that wolf without having to search serially through all of the sheep. So the pop-out effect with 4-year-olds who are adept at seeing, finding a chasing stimulus, or what we called the wolf. When we went younger, we decided to ask 11-month-olds if they had a preference for looking at objects that are animate over objects that are not animate. And 11-month-olds are tricky, but we've done quite a lot of infant work in my lab, and we get them in, and let me tell you, let me tell you what adults did, and then I'll tell you how we adapted it for little kids. So we used a change detection paradigm, and I'm going to give you an example of a change detection paradigm here. Well, you'll see. The participant's supposed to find something that's changed, and if they can't find the thing that's changed, that's called a change blindness demonstration. Let me see if I can. Where are we? Why isn't it? Oh, I think we went on to a. Oh no. Wait a minute. Okay, I have to go. Nope. Hold on. it going? No. I had it set up, but I think it ran in the background. Okay, here we go. So this is just a change blindness demo. You got these two different guys. They look different, but they're dressed up the same.
I'm looking for the skyline.
And he asks to stop for directions. And this woman is giving him directions.
Careful.
But now she's talking to the other guy. And she doesn't notice.
Excuse me? It's a row. Oh,
She doesn't notice either. So about half the people in this demonstration didn't notice. That's the change blindness demo. So we can exploit this in the lab because sometimes people notice changes and sometimes people don't notice changes, and it's really about 50%, which is great from an experimental point of view. You've got a lot of variance that you can play with. One of the things that happens is that the change, again, the theme of this whole talk is that we're going to pay attention to things that are fitness relevant. So what we're suggesting is that we're going to see things, a change in a visual array, if it's fitness relevant more quickly than if it's not fitness relevant. More specifically, we're comparing animate objects to inanimate objects. So I want you to raise your hand as soon as you see something disappear here. Yeah. So what disappeared? What disappeared? The thing on the right. What? It's a kid. That's a kid. That's a kid. Okay, so this is just, again, a demo. And that's a kid. Don't let Paul 4 babysit for you. But so the test is, the people will see this. You'll see a photograph. Something changes in the photograph, and it's a reaction time experiment. How long did it take you to figure out what changed? This is just kind of a basic experimental setup. You look at a fixation cross. You look at this first scene. There has to be a mask, because if you don't have a mask, there's a motion cue. So as long as there's a mask, it could take some time for people to notice that steeple disappeared. That's the change detection experiment. New and Cosmides did this. They did it with a number of different categories. Again, animate or inanimate. They did it with adults. They showed that people were faster at finding changes in an animate object compared to an inanimate object. They gave us their stimuli, and we did the same. So we used exactly their stimuli. But how do you ask an 11-month-old if they saw something different? Well, we're going to use a habituation paradigm. We used a habituation paradigm with 11-month-olds. Let me tell you about the logic of a habituation paradigm. The idea is that infants get bored when they look at the same thing over and over. So they start out looking at whatever you show them, and they think it's interesting, and they're going to look at it. But then when you show them the same thing a second time, it's kind of less interesting, as measured by looking time. They look at it again and again. They think it's less interesting. And this is a great paradigm for asking 11-month-olds about their categories. So you can show an 11-month-old green, and you can show them a different shade of green, and another kind of green, and another shade of green, until they're totally bored, and green is boring. And then you can show them something else, and you're essentially asking them, is that green? If it is green, then it's still boring. If it's not green, the reaction time recovers. But this works across a huge number of domains. So you can show them a domestic cat and another domestic cat, and they like cats, but then after the 5th or the 10th domestic cat, that's super boring. Then you can ask the question, is this the same category, or do you have a different category for this animal? So that's the logic behind the habituation paradigm. We, in the laboratory, sort of the definition of habituation is if the most recent, the average looking time in the most recent 3 trials is half of the average looking time of the first 3 trials, we say the infant has habituated. Then we show them something different, and they either dishabituate or they don't dishabituate. If their looking time stays at that I'm really bored level, then the category is the same for them. And if they recover, looking time recovers, then they've dishabituated, and they're telling you they've seen something different. So we took new et al.'s stimuli of scenes that appeared and that where something disappeared. Here's the cheetah or the lion chasing a zebra, disappears. So that's an animate category. There were people and horses and lions and animals. And in the inanimate category, buildings or trees disappeared, or a cup or a TV disappeared. Just a little bit different that we have to start with an attention grabber rather than a fixation cross. And then we show them, unlike the adult experiment, these 2 repeat over and over until that habituation happens, until looking time is dropped in half. And then we show them the new scene, and in order to count as a dishabituation, we have to have, first of all, we have to have evidence that they looked at the object, because this whole thing is happening in front of an eye tracker. We have to make sure that they looked at the object in the first scene, and then when they dishabituate, we have to make sure that they're looking at that part of the image again. And we found that they, like the adults, they dishabituated much more for animate objects than inanimate objects. They're at about 14% here and about 28% here. So they were faster at finding changes in animate objects than inanimate objects. Again, there's evidence that the visual system does this, and it does so early in development. The last couple of studies I'm going to talk about are again in the domain of autism, and again looking at social perception. And here I'm using group differences with people with autism to illustrate this. What I mean when I say that this social perception is specialized. That among neurotypical people, we have specialized part of our visual system that perceives social information. What I'm talking about here is biological motion. Our visual system is really good at perceiving biological motion in a really degraded stimulus like a point light walker. So despite the fact with only a small number of dots that are motion capture dots, we can see that there's somebody here and there's somebody walking. I think you can all not only see the person, but you can see what direction they're walking in. And so we're looking at the perception of biological motion in neurotypical people and people with autism. But let me explain the logic of this experiment. This experiment is called IQ Predicts Biological Motion Perception in the Autism Spectrum Disorder. Here's the logic. For neurotypical people who are on the autism spectrum, I'm positing that this perception of social information, the perception of a biological motion in a point light walker is part of our visual system. Therefore, we wouldn't expect any correlation with IQ. You wouldn't expect any correlation. You wouldn't expect IQ to be predictive of color perception. You wouldn't expect IQ to be predictive of motion perception. It's part of the visual system. It's a human universal. However, among people with autism, whatever this part of the visual system is doesn't seem to be functioning the same way it does with neurotypical people. And yet a bunch of them solve the problem. A bunch of them can see the point light walker, can tell you which direction the point light walker is going. But if they're recruiting some kind of higher order cognition, if they're using a heuristic or a strategy, they're doing something more explicit, then we would expect a correlation with IQ. And so that was the prediction we went into with this particular experiment. So we're just studying, all they have to do, so I'm showing you the pure point light walker. What the participants saw was masked, so there's a bunch of other dots on the screen, but they have to just tell us, is the person walking to the left or right? That's all they have to tell us. Some of the point light walkers were scrambled and some of them were inverted, so they're looking at exactly the same display, but it's upside down. And what we found was there was a correlation just among the group with autism, with an autism diagnosis. There's a correlation between how the proportion correct, how they did on this task, and their IQ. And the correlation was 70%. So for the group with autism, IQ is predictive of how well they're going to do on this point light walker task. There was essentially no correlation. It was like 0.06 for the control group. And on this inverted task, we also saw that among the high IQ people in the autism group, there was a very small cost of inversion. For the neurotypical group, there's a huge cost of inversion. When we see these specialized parts of our visual system, that when we're looking at faces, when we're looking at biological motion, these parts of our visual system that are really specialized for social perception, inversion has a huge cost. Like the way the performance essentially falls apart for neurotypical people. But for the people with autism, there was a much smaller cost of inversion. Again, if you think about it, the inverted trials are exactly the same displays, but they're upside down. The same information is there. So if they're not using the specialized social perception that the rest of us are using, but they're doing some kind of heuristic, you would expect less of a cost of inversion, and that's what we saw. So I know what you're thinking, you're like, well, this is a really big conclusion that you're just drawing on based on one study. Don't you want to do something more robust? So what do you want to do when you need more data? You either replicate or you do a meta-analysis. And as it turned out, during the 2020-2021 school year, all of my thesis students did meta-analyses. That's all we did that year. So we took that opportunity to revisit this question, and we did a big meta-analysis. We were able to ask two questions. One is the group difference question, where people on the autism spectrum, was performance poor compared to controls? And then we also asked this IQ question. Just really briefly, there is a group difference effect. So looking at both accuracy and reaction time, people, the control groups were better at the autism, at the point light walker perception tasks. And we again saw this relationship between IQ. So IQ predicts biological motion perception in ASD. The effect size was a bit smaller. It came out across our meta-analysis, it was about 27%, but that was much larger than the control group, which was about 6%. So again, we saw this relationship between IQ and biological motion. So again, that's evidence that what's happening in the autism group, even when they can solve the task, they're solving the task differently than the control group. And I just put this here because in our meta-analysis, sometimes a point light walker display, the task is actually to perceive an emotion. So somebody might be, the point light walker might look really angry or look really sad. In the case where the task was to perceive emotion, the relationship with IQ is much stronger. It was like 20 times stronger. So but just again in the autism group, not in the typical group. Okay, so those are the experiments I wanted to talk about. I set out to convince you that the visual system is designed to process fitness relevant information. I kind of stayed in the domain of social information, but we saw evidence that people look at faces faster, people look at angry faces faster than happy faces. We process faces, we don't need to linger, we don't have to have long fixation durations on faces because we process them really fast. We saw evidence that social orienting is automatic in people without autism, even though it's not automatic in people with autism. We saw evidence that 4-year-olds can find a chase scene in a pop-out design. We saw evidence that 11-year-olds find a change in animacy, and we saw some evidence that within a group of people with autism, IQ predicts biological motion perception, but we wouldn't expect it to in a neurotypical group, and we didn't find that in a neurotypical group. So I hope you're convinced the visual system is designed to process fitness-relevant information. Thank you. Yes?
Where'd you buy those shoes?
These are flu bugs. They're flu bugs.
And I have another question now. You mentioned the hand part. I was really intrigued by the hand data. So tell me about the fitness relevance of focusing on hands.
Well, because what our thought was that is the activity. Like if humans have agency and humans are going to do something, they're likely to be doing that with their hands. If you're throwing or you're weaving or like what.
Like is it the hand specifically or like the overall body?
Well, yes, I didn't. We also have evidence in our lab that people pay attention to bodies, but that experiment was motivated by the thought that if you have a goal, you're probably going to use your hands to get to that goal. So that's a big part of how you impact the world is through your hands. So people are paying attention to your hands to find out what you're doing and what you're up to and what your goals are. Yeah.
I have a question. You say design, but to me that implies coming to the world and it's ready to go. But I'm wondering how much of some of the effects could be practice. So we obviously tend things because they're important. That could make us more accurate and faster in a variety of task bases. So
Yeah.
I suppose you use that.
I'm not going to get drawn into the nature-nurture debate. And here's my answer to the whole learning question. That learning isn't the explanation. Learning is the phenomenon to be explained. So yes, probably a lot. Learning has a lot to do with this. Experience has a lot to do with this. But it's because our minds are designed to see the regularities in the world, to adapt to the experiences we have. That our minds are designed to learn. For me, that doesn't take us a step away from an evolutionary explanation. We're learning because we're evolved to learn.
But it would change, like if you could show the same effects with random shapes that people practice, would
Well,
mean that it's not faces per se, it's the skill that's developed with practice.
Yeah, I mean, so I would predict that a lot of these fitness-relevant tasks are easier to learn, but I'm not going to predict that we can't learn other things because classic conditioning is still true and operant conditioning is still true. We can learn really boring, irrelevant stuff, but stuff that's fitness-relevant is going to be easier to learn, is what I'm suggesting. Yeah.
So I'm thinking in particular about things like Poplar effects that you described, change detection. It seems like, a conclusion you might draw from those studies is that, and put in your language, fitness-relevant attributes might capture attention, right? So something I've just been, throughout your time, think about, what about the role of emotion, the processing of emotion? And I don't think I have a better form of question than that. It's just like, in the context of doing research, looking at the specialness of fitness-relevant information, is there also thought about ways in which fitness-relevant information might have an emotional salience, I guess is where I'm going, right? So does processing the emotion play any role in thinking when you do studies about the capture by fitness-relevant information?
Sure. Does that get us off track in some way?
No, not really, but in some ways, I'm actually thinking about like second year cognition kinds of issues like early selection and late selection in attention oriented. I mean, some things that are fascinating about your studies are that it seems like, wait a second, attention is being captured by some higher order attribute, like a face, right? And wouldn't you think, and there are a lot of basic theories of attention capture which suggest that it's driven by low level visual processing. But if, at a glance, right, you can perceive higher order visual information, and the emotionality of that higher order meaning is processed really, really quickly, then is it possible that the emotion that gets extracted really, really, really quickly drives some kind of computation of salience, which drives where you look? Anyway, I'm playing with, I don't have an answer, I'm just saying, I'm sitting here looking at all your talks, and it kept coming up to, what about emotional processing?
Yeah, so going back to the very first experiment that I showed where people are faster at finding an angry face than a happy face, that might be emotionally evocative, and it might be part of what's being processed when you're doing the visual search task. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for this book. I'm just wondering a little bit about your meta-analysis findings for the inversion effect and the fact that it's related to IQ in people with ASD. Can you say anything more about what you think is going on there?
Well, so I'm trying to make this distinction between the neurotypical group, they're opening their eyes and doing something that their visual system is specialized to do. It's happening. It's fast. It's automatic. It's something that you can't decide not to do. And like color processing, like motion perception, IQ wouldn't impact that at all. The group with autism, some of them are solving the problem at the exact same rates as the neurotypical group, but if they're doing it using another heuristic, another strategy, a higher order strategy, they're not using the specialized visual processes that the neurotypical group is. The neurotypical group is going to get completely stymied when you invert those social displays. Even though if you want to talk about, an ideal observer or something, all the information is the exact same information. It's all there. But if what the group with autism is doing is not using these specialized visual processes, they've come up with a different solution, that new solution might not be impacted by inversion at the same rates.
I guess that's the question I'm trying to get at. What do you think they're actually, what's driving it? Right? I understand the premise of the whole thing, but what do you think they're actually using?
Well, I think that one of the cues that's used is the motion of a particular dot rather than the whole form, because, and Nico Troya talks about this a lot, like if there's this, a single dot is doing this, and you can tell which direction the walker's going just with that information, right? So, and it could be idiosyncratic, it could be that every single one of them is using a different solution, but it's something that's doesn't have to engage any kind of social perception. Maybe. I don't really know. I don't know what they're doing, and I don't know that all of them are doing the same thing. They could have found different solutions, but whatever they're doing seems to be it's not as impacted by inversion. Yeah.
Are there other tasks, like social tasks, that people with autism, if there's like a correlation to IQ on? Like, is that something that's just novel to the blocking thing, or are there other instances where that occurs?
Are there other social tasks that correlate with IQ?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I haven't looked into that. No. Yeah.
My question is kind of related to the other one. So I can't remember what paper it is, but there's kind of a theory that one of the reasons why individuals with ASD struggle with processing emotion is because they're processing the face in pieces rather than as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if you think that that is playing a role
Mm-hmm.
here. And the second question I have in relation to this is, are those other dots acting as distractors? Because as you said, you actually only need the two dots. And did you try removing everything but the trackers on the feet so that you literally only have the two to see if this effect holds?
No, in this experiment, so what I showed you was sort of a clean point light walker. In this experiment, the point light walkers were masked. So there were 50 other dots on the screen. So you had to find the motion in this kind of noisy display. Yeah.
So a question about the IQ finding. I mean, there are other completely different contexts where you can show this seemingly low-level visual performance, like acuity is predictive, let's say, of cognitive function, better than cognitive tests, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tim Salthouse has said that he thinks that those measures, that visual acuity, are just an index of overall brain health.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering two things. Do you see this IQ in your autistic subjects in other kinds of tasks near threshold? And do you think if you made the task really hard for neurotypicals, like some sort of threshold that degraded the stimulus so that they're down like 75%, do you think that you might see a correlation in that group of IQ? Because I know that you've tested a lot of people in like psychophysical experiments, and so have I. And there are some subjects that
Yeah.
frankly are really good, and others that are less.
Yeah, I mean, there's some point you could push it where you're getting measures of attention and motivation and, just like, do I want to be here? Yeah, I think you could create situations where you could correlate with IQ or motivation or.
But in your autistic subjects, does this correlation with IQ, will this only occur with these social tasks, or can it be like if you measure spot detection threshold, that the better subjects have higher IQ?
I haven't seen that, but I also haven't gone looking for that, so I'm not sure. Paul?
Sort of a fun question. Point light walker inversion effect. You did with distractor dogs in the real experiment, or
Yes.
been shown just with plain no distractor dogs? Is this neurotypical?
Oh, no, I think you'd get close to ceiling effects if if they weren't masked.
Okay. Now, I was just wondering if there's some biological association with, things are valid with gravitational effects and not valid with gravitational, because we haven't experienced with gravity
Mm-hmm.
in our everyday life. And I'm wondering if that might better been invoked as an explanation. Things that violate our expectations of gravity.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, this task, all you had to do is say if it was left or right. So,
No, I was just more interested in the neurotypical group.
yeah.
What do they seem to have trouble with it? You pointed out-
Oh, yes, yeah. There's definitely a cost of inversion in a point light walker detection task. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry if this is a little naive, but I was just wondering, is the visual systems designed to process fitness relevant information? Does it only apply to certain tasks, or is it like a pretty universal design of it? Like, does it apply when I'm just processing, I'm even looking at or anything? Like, is there only certain situations where you feel like it's benefit for assessing?
I would say it could show up in a lot of places. For example, looking at the moon and seeing a face. There's no face there, but people often see a face when they look at the moon. So it could show up in a lot of different places. Yeah.
So this is more AI generated like motion videos, like Janurary, for
can recognize that from, like we can differentiate that from real motion. Do you think there's any role is playing that ability?
So is the question, do we use these perceptual processes when we're looking at artificially generated? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You could, it works on like cartoons, faces pop out. Yes, it doesn't have to be naturalistic stimuli. It can be stylized, it can be animation, yeah. I mean, the Hyder and Simmel demonstration shows you that you've just got two triangles in a circle and you're seeing this whole rich drama happening. So yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, this day AI is really good at like generating fake like videos, and there are people moving in those videos, but we can still tell apart that's not real people, but we cannot actually say what's the like difference between those from the real people. And is that something like automatic or unconscious processing going on, like related to this?
So when you look at a face that's AI generated and it doesn't quite look right,
But cannot say what's the difference.
but you can't articulate why it doesn't quite look right. So what's the question?
So is that something because AI generated information is not that?
No, I don't know. I think that theoretically, it's theoretically possible that AI could generate a face that's undetectably AI generated. I think that gap there is just a technology gap that's probably going to be gone in a month. Should we wrap it up? What do you think?
Not sure what I should say.